I'd now like to turn to Garry Jacobs, President and CEO of the World Academy, and our esteemed co-host. Besides his titles, the best way to describe Garry is through his work. I'm only slightly exaggerating when I say that Garry himself is an embodiment of a leader in the 21st century. In his work, he is focusing on new paradigms and strategies in fields as diverse as governance, economy, business, education, international security, etc. Garry, it's my pleasure to invite you to speak. Thank you.
David, thank you so much. And my thanks to the Director General and to all your colleagues at the UNOG for making this such a meaningful and enjoyable experience. I've come to get great admiration for the dedication of the team in Geneva and a much greater appreciation of the challenges that you faced in negotiating not only the complexities of the world, but the many stakeholders and masters and owners and claimants to the work of the United Nations. I'd like to speak just very briefly about the context in which this project is taking place and what we hope to get out of it. It's hard to even remember back to the end of the Cold War now and how exhilarated and exuberant we were in hopes of nuclear disarmament and world trade, the founding of the internet, the growth of regional governance, especially in Europe. And then of course, we had our problems, but still the future in the 21st century looked to be something very much looking forward to. And then following 2008, we seem to have hit a bump and a curve and seem to have been going in the other direction. And already several of the speakers have alluded to where we seem to be heading from an actual retreat from much of the progress that we've been making, a retreat from democracy to autocracy, a retreat from our principles of global free trade, from regional cooperation. We still got Brexit right on the agenda, a loss of faith in our institutions at all levels, both at the international level, at the national level, our media, even the credibility of science. And all of this leading to the idea that even after the remarkable decision in 2015 to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals, to try to take the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and embody it in actual implementation and achieve it, we seem to be going in the other direction. And that led us to, in our discussions, lengthy discussions and partnership with the UN, to come up with this proposal on the principle that in spite of the difficulties and not minimizing the opposition and the resistance to them, that there must be something we can do that will energize progress and move us beyond the limitation, the barriers, and the obstructions that are in the way. And that's what we coined this phrase, catalytic strategies. Catalytic strategies that would not solve all our problems at once, would not be comprehensive solutions, but would show us with the right type of leadership, not just leadership of people, but leadership of organizations and leadership of ideas and leadership of the right types of systems and measures and movements and networks, that we could in fact find the way to lead ourselves forward during this period. And then the pandemic came, and as if we didn't have enough on our agenda before then. And strangely, we conducted a meeting 6 months ago of about 300 experts online with UNOG. And it was strange that in spite of being right in the middle of this very difficult times, how much hope there was that the pandemic also demonstrated to us that if we wanted to change, we really could change. If we wanted to make a breakthrough in areas that we found it very difficult, whether it's in education or in healthcare priorities or even in global finance, that we could do something that we hadn't been able to do for decades or even more. And this is the premise from which we start. what we are going to discuss during this conference, we're not going to attempt to deal with all of the issues or all of the solutions that are necessary. What we are going to try to do is to point out that there really are things we can do to move ahead. In the conference, we're going to have 10 sessions focusing on critical issues. We're going to look at the problems of food security, which have been magnified tremendously by the pandemic and rightly drawing attention to the phenomenal work of World Food Program in addressing critical food conditions and hunger conditions. We're going to look at the rising problem of unemployment, which by projections is likely to get much worse before it gets better. We're going to look at the problem of climate change and the need for a planetary plan to really push us through because we're far behind the targets that we were planning on. We're going to look at the problem of education, especially the higher education, because all the projections are that we're getting further and further behind in our goals of trying to provide quality education to all who seek it and all who need it. And the pandemic has only aggravated those problems by closing down our schools over the world, all over the world. We're going to look at the issue of finance and how much money we really need to implement these SDGs and all of the problems we have, but what's going on, the positive changes that are going on, and the opportunities both for public finance and private finance that can really make a difference. And you're going to hear some very encouraging research that's being done and trends that are unfolding. We're going to look at the critical challenge that we have in implementing the SDGs of how do we go from formulation of goals and ideas to effective policies and strategies and implementation. How do we close the gap between the research and the action, or between the different disciplines, each looking at the problem from a different perspective? We're going to look at some interesting ideas on how we could build trust, greater trust in the multilateral system and trust in the media, especially the press, which, as we have seen recently, is so critical one way or the other to the functioning of democratic societies. And very importantly, we're going to look at the role of youth and youth networks. And how can we mobilize the voice of global society, the we, the people? How can we, rather than going only through our national governments, which we know are not that representative a lot of the time, how can we get a direct voice for global society in making real change to our multilateral system? And all of this under an umbrella of looking at not one or other independent areas, but looking, all of these are aspects of human security. And the UN 75 report, which the Director General mentioned, one of the voices was clear. The people are interested not just in national security, they're interested in all these dimensions of security, and we've got to find an integrated way of conceptualizing and acting on them together. We're here not with all the solutions. We're here with some what we think are very valuable ideas, proposals that have come not just from the Academy and from UNOG, but about 70 different partner organizations who have been involved in this partnership, for which we're very grateful, to whom we're very grateful. And what we've come here before is not to pronounce the answers, but to debate, to discuss, to project possibilities and hear from a group of wonderful experts. And then we will go back and formulate again from what we've heard, have some further meetings, and finally come back with final recommendations of the project. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, David, for your gracious hosting. We look forward to the program.